just hello from Closers again with Ian and myself. And today we're going to be talking about the real ROI on sales training, and it's very much about starting to think about this differently. It's not just about creating an idea about sales training, it's about actually being able to form it in a way that a CFO will understand. You know, if you've ever been through a large software transition project, you know, 1 million, 2 million pounds, there was a great degree of rigor on that. There was a great degree of deciding what you needed to do, who was going to do it, what was your various metrics, and it was governed well. And that doesn't always happen with sales training. And therefore, CFOs, they go, I don't understand what the value in this is. So we're trying to show you how you can show value.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, there's sales comes in many different formats, and selling the value of any project internally is a form of sales itself.
Yeah.
So I literally had a call this morning with a sales enablement team, and part of their remit over the next couple of months is to sell the concept of a sales training program to their department to win budget, to the finance department, I beg your pardon, to win budget. So this is, in essence, it's another form of selling, but it's a really important part that is often overlooked. But it's something that we're really interested in because, you know, maybe not everybody is aware of it, but our tagline at Closers is "Don't buy sales training, buy results." And the results, whilst everybody comes to Closers asking for training, really what they want are the results. The training is just the mechanism that's going to get them there. Sorry, I'm talking too much already, Neil.
No, and it's very much about, you know, a lot of these training investments fail that finance test because it hasn't been thought through. And they haven't found out the reasons, you know, doing the groundwork beforehand and then making sure the engagement's there, then delivering the training and then monitoring what you've done afterwards. And also, if you've got quite a lot of churn in your company and you're bringing on new people regularly, how quickly can you get them from a standing start to being fully productive? Again, that's a cost. These sort of numbers need to be put in place so that the CFO can understand it. You know, and again, changing your training model from OPEX to CAPEX, that they're making a serious investment, they're going to invest whatever over this next year, you know, and just starting to talk a wee bit more sort of financial language so that you don't have a blocker sitting there going, oh, this is just a nice to have. This is really important.
Could I just touch on that, the CAPEX and OPEX? And if you view training as, and it's not, most training is delivered obviously under OPEX. And again, you know, there's a couple of use cases I can think of at the moment that we're working on where it's really best to position it as CAPEX. And how do you do that? Because you do that by showing it as an investment, not in a 1 day, what I would describe as a magic wand workshop. You describe it, you put together a program that is much more long term. And the particular use cases I'm thinking of, we're helping them create their own internal sales academy. So the content for the workshop will not just be used on a particular day next year. The content is going to be used for new starters. It's going to be used to upskill a number of people from different departments over a number of years. And having that long-term thinking and long-term planning, right, is really important, because if you don't think long-term, you're always going to be relying on an external partner like Closers to deliver the training. And that's great for us, and you know, we're very grateful, but I would suggest, best in practice, you should be building your own internal training programs with your own internal training delivery capability, so that you're not reliant on an external partner.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. You and I were on a call yesterday with a business, a large European business, and they were in a situation in their market where there was a tremendous amount of market demand. So the sales didn't have to work too hard. You know, it was pretty much order taking. And then the market changed various things changed within the market. So all of a sudden it went from market demand to actually having to find it yourself. And when we were talking to the people within the sort of sales enablement department, they were saying, well, we haven't even trained our managers for 5 years and we haven't trained our salespeople at all. And then all of a sudden they've got a big problem. The market's changed and they don't have that internal resilience that Ian was talking about to do something about it. So it becomes a very big investment, and it's a we've got to do it now kind of investment, which always makes it harder to push through.
Yeah, and I think, in terms of big investment, I forget the numbers exactly, but I think that particular call that Neil's referring to was circa just under 300 people. So we're talking a big investment, and again, that's my raison d'etre about building internal sales capability, building your own internal sales academy, so you don't have to go external and pay, being perfectly honest, which is going to be more. It's always going to cost more to bring in an external team like closers or any other training provider.
Yeah. Good. So again, that's one of the important things about training. Quite often when people do training courses, it's a one-day hit and then that's it. You've had your training, on you go. And that doesn't always produce the ROI at the end of the 6 months, because some people get it, some people don't. Lots of people forget it. They put the book away and they just get on with what they did before. And it's one of our philosophies as well within closers that we always, well, we can't always insist on it, but we always highly encourage it to have follow-up so that you can check in on people. And if you're checking in on people, then they're going to do what they learned in most cases, So again, you can see how much we're talking about in these numbers, but then again, less than 15% can actually show the benefits. So it's about planning before and then delivering afterwards. What would you say about that, Ian?
Yeah, there's a study, I forget which university it was, but they studied retention of learning. And I think if anybody Googles I think it's called the Ebbinghaus, Ebbinghaus, Ebbinghaus curve, it will show how whatever we learn, right, without any form of reinforcement is quickly forgotten. And typically, what you're looking at is around 80% of learning will be lost within 30 days without any form of reinforcement. So quite often it's important to go over even the same topics again, not just keep introducing new topics, but that reinforcement in a perfect world should be done by managers on the job, because the best form of learning is learning by doing.
Yeah. And again, the sort of measurement post-course is sometimes false satisfaction, I would put it. That the reps loved it, they learned a lot, engagement was high, but that doesn't mean anything really for a CFO. They're looking about what's the outcome, how quick have we ramped our people up, what are the results, how have our pipeline filled up or our lead time closed down, these type of figures is what they're looking for.
So if I could just touch on that, Neil, because I think that's a really important point. In the training world, people quite often talk about what they call the happy sheets. And those are the feedback sheets that you can get that any trainer is going to give you at the end of a training event. And without sounding arrogant and blasé, right, it's not particularly difficult to get 8, 9, 10 out of 10 on these feedback sheets. Right, but that does not equate to learning. That does not equate to results. That equates to the learning environment that the individual's going through. Did they learn something new? Right, but it doesn't equate to what is really required is behavioural change.
Yeah.
And you really need that behavioural change. Now, I'm not naive enough to think you can change behaviours in a day, in a one-day workshop, but those are the things. The behavioural change is what is the most important. Because if you don't get behavioural change, you won't actually get any change in results. So that the typical measurement when you ask reps for feedback after training. And I'm not saying don't do that. It's perfectly okay to do that. You should be finding out what was the learning environment like. You should find out if the trainer had done research and had prepared properly. I'm totally okay with that. I'm just talking about on top of that, we need to have stuff that is more tangible for a CFO.
And that means follow up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So it's the sales enablement advantage. So again, it's having someone dedicated to keep an eye on this post-training and pre-training, because quite often the people who are actually on the field looking after a team of salespeople, they're very busy doing that, and they don't always have time to actually follow up. And if you have someone dedicated to doing this follow-up, you're much more likely to be able to measure it beforehand and afterwards. And you've worked with a lot of these teams, Ian, and helped sort of shape what they do. Do you want to give us a bit more on that?
Yeah, and you know, right at the start, you mentioned that if we leave it to sales managers, sales directors, and salespeople, it's not going to happen because they're busy chasing sales targets. And it's not a criticism. They've got different areas of responsibility, and measuring sales training is not one of them. So the advantage that the bigger companies have, the bigger organizations, is that they may have what was described as a sales enablement team, a sales enablement department, and they're much more organized, and because that's what they do. You know, they're working on big learning projects, not just for you know, for the different areas within sales, whether it be business development, account managers, leadership training. You know, they're working, and that's their responsibility. So the big enterprises have got that advantage. As you move down, I've certainly worked with business leaders who are literally spinning 50 plates, right? And to them, and this is not a criticism, to them, worrying about the training is just not on the radar. They've got so many other things that they're worrying about. So the bigger companies have an advantage because they've got the bigger teams. HR, even if you've just got HR, that's better, but it's, in my mind, it's never as good as the sales enablement, because HR are typically understaffed and under-resourced as well, and they're juggling a number of different issues. So, you know, the first step is to get HR involved because it's about people. And then the next step I would suggest is getting HR, and then if you've got that budget, sales enablement.
Yeah. And again, with that big company we were talking about earlier on, that was sales enablement. You know, it was a separate department that was focusing on this large project, and they were wanting to be able to measure it, and they had different ideas. And it does make a difference when you can take that strategic approach, I would call it, to your sales training rather than just reacting to it. So again, this is one of the important things I think we need to mention about talking to the CFO in the way that they would like to hear it. And it's, you know, you're not talking about expenses anymore, because quite often sales training gets positioned as an expense rather than an investment. So it's just changing that, you know, justifying the cost, you know, measuring activity, HR decision, you know, it's a nice to have, you know, or we don't need it just now. It's not an essential part of the business. Whereas if you're actually looking at how much you're going to invest in that, or how much, what I would call the business value is by investing in that for the business over time. And again, the sort of return, if you say, well, we're going to do this, what are we going to get back from it? It really just changes that this is something well worth investing in, because the benefits you're going to get out of it, like Ian was mentioning about building internal capacity with the sales academy, that's something that costs money to build, but then you've got your own investment that will keep running. And you might have light touch afterwards with some improvements or current things coming up. But do you want to just drop in a couple of things where you've worked on these type of projects?
So a couple of things when I'm reading what you've got on the slide there, Neil, a couple of things. It's not possible to grow sales. You grow the people, and the people grow the sales. So you have to invest in your people. And I would argue that people are the most important asset that every business has. And you've got to see them as an asset, and you've got to think, well, okay, I'm going to invest in these individuals.
Yeah.
But it's just not possible to grow sales. It is possible, right, to grow people, and those people will in turn grow sales. So I think that's the first thing that I would suggest. And the other thing, I'm just thinking through. I'm obviously of an age here, like where I remember, the large tech companies from Silicon Valley when they came over to my country, Scotland, and not only did they invest in sales, manufacturing, service, they built physical sales academies. These were
Yeah.
physical buildings, with training rooms, etc., etc. Now, the world moved on from there, and there was the LMS, online learning management systems. And forgive me, most salespeople are not going to even switch on your LMS. They don't have the patience to log in. I'm not saying that it's a complete waste of time, but it's not it's not a really powerful vehicle. And again, that's come up in I think 3 conversations this week.
Yeah.
We've got an LMS, but nobody uses it.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm suggesting is that you don't need to build a physical building. You don't even need an LMS to start with when it comes to creating your own sales academy. The first thing you need is that mindset.
Yes.
Okay, so how can we start to build a sales library? And once we've got a sales library, which of our team internally would be good at delivering individual pieces of content?
Yeah.
And you don't need to have one dedicated trainer. You could have one salesperson who's best in class at delivering presentations. You could have another salesperson who's best in class at delivering discovery calls. And if you know anything about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, part of that learning and teaching others is self-development.
Yeah.
So they will only get better as they start to train and teach other people. So, my suggestion about an internal sales academy, whilst I should have clarified, this does not need a lot of money. It just needs the right mindset, and then from then you can add and invest in it as you get the results.
And I think that's a really important point, because lots of companies will be familiar with, oh, we're going to invest, we're going to buy a new CRM for the team, and that's seen as an investment. But actually training up the team and getting the team self-sustaining is actually much more powerful to the company, yet it's not viewed in the same value as investing in a CRM. So it's the difference between humans and technology. And we should be considering humans as your secret weapon, not the technology, having sold technology for years.
And just to reiterate, the best salespeople will be able to sell with a spreadsheet. They don't need a CRM. And I'm a huge fan of CRM. I think every company should have a CRM. All I'm suggesting is that to back up what Neil's saying there is that the best salespeople do not need a CRM. They will sell no matter what. They will find a way because that's in their DNA. That's part of their mindset.
So again, starting to look at the CFO grade metrics you need to start thinking about, and these are things that will strike a chord with the CFO if you're starting to talk in this language. It's things like, the days to full productivity for new hires. We've mentioned this already. Again, percentage increase in opportunities closed, days to qualified opportunities to close. And again, things like that, the ones that come after, your revenue per sales head, where you can actually look at what's happened historically and how you can measure that against going forward. And again, value per closed deal, are you getting bigger and bigger deals? And again, total sales closed to new customers and a cost per acquisition. And again, that can be very important depending on what market you're in. If you're in very big markets, small markets, sometimes cost per acquisition. If you say, well, it costs that much, but they're worth that much over 5 years, then all of a sudden the cost per acquisition is nothing because it's worth your while because you've got upsells, cross sells, and ways to actually get value out of that customer. So knowing these arguments is really important. And again, months to ROI break even, how long is it going to take you after you invested in your training before, that's paid for itself? I'm sure you've had lots of discussions about this too, Ian.
Yeah, and uh, what I would suggest is there's probably about another dozen things that I could put on there. I obviously appreciate it's for brevity and space on the slide there. We can't have everything, but there's lots of other things that you could put on there, and it may be that there's some things that are more relevant in your business, and that's okay. The point is that you've got to have something that's a bit more tangible. You've got to have something that you can track and measure, and that's probably another thing that a lot of companies don't even track and measure these outside of any form of training context, and you should be tracking and measuring those things.
And again, it's just stepping on to getting your ducks in a row almost, the things you have to start considering, build up lists. And again, we don't have everything on the slide, as we mentioned before, but the key section here is things like the overview of the investment, what's actually going to be involved and how long it's going to be and how it's actually working. Because one of the key things we used to do a lot when I was selling large software is one of the first questions we always asked is, what are your key KPIs? What are your key objectives? What are your key goals for the business, not the team, the whole business? So it meant that when you were bringing your focus about what you have just now, your as is landscape, how you are, and what you would like it to be, and the costs in between, it's aligning with company goals and values. So that strategic alignment, I think, is one of the very key things that sometimes people forget. They just think locally about their department rather than thinking globally about the whole business. And again, your financial projections, again, looking at what you're thinking, what you think you could be, and that's more to do with your sort of to-be landscape, where you'd like to get to. And then again, your risk assessment, what are the dangers? What could happen? Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? Is the market going to change like we were discussing earlier? Because sometimes you can just be ramping up like crazy because you've got market demand. And then for one reason or another, it can turn on its head and market demand goes away. So you have to rethink your projections at that point.
Yeah.
And then again, these technical numbers is very important. Your net present value calculation and your internal return as well. It's very important that you can understand that and you can speak that language back, because if you can get these percentages and these ratios correct, and we'll be able to show you a way how you can actually do that later, it means that your CFO, your finance department, they start looking and go, that actually makes a sense. It would be silly not to do it.
Yeah.
So is that something you've come across quite a bit, Ian, that sort of making the change for the head?
Yeah, and again, forgive me for repeating this, but salespeople have to build a business case when they're trying to sell any form of solution, any form of product. And this is no different. You've got to build a compelling business case for the training. And it's got to be in the language of the people who are going to be approving the budget. Now, NPV, IRR, that stuff, those are not phrases that I would use in my everyday business world, but those are the phrases that that will be common to the CFO. So you've got to speak in their language.
Yeah. Okay, so again, we've talked about this, but this puts it more into the numbers in the right language. So, if you're looking at getting that score, he was entertaining, content was challenging, nobody's comfort zone was threatened, and these numbers mean you won't get a change, results will improve and revenue will increase. It doesn't mean that. And that's why you have to get hard numbers. And I think you touched on that earlier, Ian.
Yeah, and the one thing I would that comes to mind looking at that there as a practical example is that role play. Most salespeople would run a mile to avoid role play. Now, for the life of me, I do not understand how a company would spend literally hundreds of thousands and millions to get salespeople in front of a prospect, for the salespeople not to have practiced that conversation, because that's what it is. It's a practice. Role play is just a practice. And If you've got salespeople who are not comfortable doing role play, that is a sign that they've got a further problem with confidence. They lack the confidence, not just the skills to do that. So it's a good example of how you could deliver a training session on role play, and you may not be the most popular training person in the world, but that doesn't mean that the audience didn't need it. That doesn't mean that they're not going to benefit from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's sort of stepping forward on that. Again, looking at all these different parts, but being able to measure them as you go through, and to be able to, look at it over time afterwards. I think that's a really important part, to actually monitor it. Okay, because I always say this thing to people, and we used to talk about in the industry years ago, we've been on a training course, it was a bit like sheep dip, but the trouble with sheep dip is it wears off really quickly. It's this sort of hot bath motivation. You had a really nice day, it was lots of fun. I got a couple of nuggets, but it didn't really change what you did out in the field.
Yeah.
And by actually following up and monitoring what you're doing, it's actually going to give a much more powerful, I would say, reason next time you go back and say, we need more training or we need to develop our academy further. Say, well, that last time we gave you 500,000, we got an awful lot back. That was really good. Whereas if you don't measure it, you can't actually justify it.
I'm just thinking, if anybody's looking at this thinking, this is there's a lot to this, this could maybe be perceived as a bit overwhelming. Start off with one KPI.
Yeah.
You don't have to build the whole thing before you start. You can just start off with one KPI and then move on from there. And that one KPI could be, I'm just thinking of a recent one, number of physical meetings that the salespeople were having.
Yeah.
So the thinking behind that was the more meetings they have, they'd worked out from their own CRM data, the top performing salespeople did more meetings.
Yeah.
Now, whilst that might be obvious to everybody, right? There's sometimes the obvious isn't that obvious, and that was the one thing that they wanted the training focused around, was getting more meetings, getting the people in front of more people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's quite important to not feel overwhelmed. Like you say, pick one or two things and measure them. And every business will be different. So this is probably your hot topic, training provider audit, and how you judge people that come in and what they offer and how they talk to you, so that you can actually realize what sort of outcomes you're going to get from the training before you even take it further down the road.
Yeah, and this is difficult because a lot of training projects are sometimes delivered, I would describe as last minute. So they've got an annual get together, and somebody has then decided that they're going to add on a day at the end of or at the start of the annual get together, and they want to have a workshop there, and just uncovering getting our customer to uncover what the baseline metrics are and all the different things is difficult.
Yeah.
In most cases, because they're understaffed, because training for most companies is the people who are organising it is not part of their job. They've got to do it on top of their business as usual activity. So it typically does not get the rigor that it should do.
That's fair enough. And again, this is one of the things that I think a lot of people don't get. And that company we were speaking to have suddenly realized that, to do nothing costs. If you don't do anything, how much is it going to cost your business?
Yeah. But again, every one of us, when we're selling, we're selling against the status quo. We're selling against when you're selling software, in many cases, you've got to sell against the existing systems and processes that are in place, and it's always easier for the customer to do nothing. So you've got to have some form of compelling arguments there. right? That makes sense.
Yeah, and it's quite often easy to find these numbers. It's just sometimes people don't think about doing that as part of their argument. The
Yeah,
numbers are there, but you just have to formulate them and say, look, if we do nothing, this is what's going to happen. Or, that we're going to get less and less and less, or it's going to be difficult to retain people because they're dissatisfied. They want to have more progression. Because again, that's a hidden cost to sales as well. If you've got churn and you're losing your salespeople, recruiting a new one, getting them on board, getting them up to speed, and then getting them back out, that's a massive cost. If you can keep your people happy, winning, making good money, enjoying what they do, it's so much better for your business. It's actually, that's a really good thing for your business.
yeah. I can't remember which year it was, but the Kelly workforce survey cited learning as the second reason that employees would join a new company. So learning is right up there with a pay rise in terms of the motivation to get people to come to a company, but equally it's the motivation to get them to stay at your company.
Yeah, yeah. And this is more about killing deals, but if you look at that, the IBM number at the bottom, 67% are less likely to proceed when these triggers occur. So it's about framing what you're doing in the right way. And often finance people are very, very technical in their approach. They
Yeah.
have figures, formulas, numbers, and that's how they like to have things framed in. So it's really worth thinking about this. And we just recently did a webinar on this, and it was quite interesting, the feedback we got from people who'd watched it, went, oh, and actually thought exactly like that, why we were struggling with these type of people. And it's not that they're wrong, or it's just that they're different.
So that goes back to the buyer persona, Neil.
Yeah.
You've got to know your buyer persona. You've got to know your uh, what it is that's important to them, not what's important to you, but what's important to them.
Yeah. And then again, starting to look at your own competition, what are they actually doing? Other companies, how much they're investing, are they getting better win rates? These sort of arguments as well. We often do that as we do what we call competitor investigations and then comparisons. And we look at lots of different figures. And sometimes we can help companies out with that as well, because they haven't really done an in-depth one on a lot of these factors. And they think, oh, they're just beating us because they're beating us. But, there's sometimes something else behind it. So it's, again, by doing that, checking first, it allows you to go back with more numbers, say, well, look, this company, that company, they're doing this and they're getting these sort of results. We really need to up our game or invest more in this area. What do you think about that, Ian?
I'm trying to remember what somebody told me years ago, and I can't remember who it was, but someone said, if you're not selling, it means that somebody else is uh, presenting it and doing it and delivering it better than you are.
Yeah.
And it really got me thinking, because that is the reality for all of us. If we're not winning deals, and somebody else is, that somebody else is presenting it maybe in a better way, doing it in a better way, and delivering it in a better way. So that phrase really got me thinking about how you need to take that your own level of ownership, your own level of accountability, and go, you know what, right? Because it's so easy when you lose a deal to go, oh, I got undercut on price. And in most cases, we don't know that. We just say that we got undercut on price.
Yeah.
And I just think that all of us, myself included, we need to have a slightly better mindset and go, you know what, right? I'm going to take ownership of this. And in the same way that I take ownership when I win the deals, I'm going to take ownership when I lose the deals.
Yeah.
the sales guys who go out and ring the bell, ring the bell, and who get all the kudos for winning deals. Yeah, that's great, and they should get that credit. But we also need to realize that there's another end of that, and when we're not winning deals, we need to have some form of accountability there, right?
Yeah.
It's down to us. It's not down to the customer. It's not down to the economy. It's not down to whatever. It's down to us. We've got to own that.
And I think one of the things, if you quickly look at the industry benchmarks, these are not additional numbers. I would say they're geometric numbers. If you get a percentage increase in one, percentage increase in another, percentage increase in another, it goes geometric. And that's why doing nothing is so bad, because you're staying stuck. And other companies are investing in different parts of their business and different ways of managing and encouraging their people to do more, feel better about themselves, actually go out, as Ian was saying, and ring the bell. It's a geometric progression by investing in sales training if you do it properly. And it will change things radically, not just additionally. So that's pretty much our content. You want to say anything more before we go into Q&A, Ian?
Yeah, one thing I would suggest is that you need to start, everybody needs to start, including us, you need to start thinking about the input. What's the input? And whilst a lot of what we've talked about today is that, that we want to measure the outputs, we want to prove that there's an ROI, that there's some value there. None of that value will ever appear without the inputs at the start of the process. And the inputs are typically going to be the behaviors that your salespeople are doing. And don't try and boil the ocean whole. Pick 1, 2, or 3 core behaviors that you want to try and improve in your salespeople, and just work on those, and then add to that. But without those inputs, right, the training itself, again, it's going to end up being potentially a really great experience for everybody, but just not delivering enough. So in addition to what we've talked about today, just think about the inputs, because you can tell somebody, for example, how to pick up the phone and make a cold call in a training session. We actually demonstrate how to do it live, and we would cold call their customers for them or prospects for them, but we still need them to actually pick up the phone after the training when we are not there.
Yeah.
So those sorts of inputs are critical, probably more than anything. Those inputs are critical to delivering any form of ROI.
Yeah. So have we had any questions? I don't know if we have actually had any questions. If anyone's got any questions, you can drop them in the chat or in the Q&A.
I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that we've not covered, Neil.
I think it's the mindset and looking at justifying your sales training. As a salesperson, you have to justify that to a prospect or a customer, to your internal team.
Yeah.
Don't just expect them to go, oh yeah, we do sales training. Yeah, here's some money. It's very much about, this is why it is. And the stronger you can build your case, and if you can use the ROI or even go further and start to look at the business value that you're bringing by doing this based on, again, competitor analysis and likely outcomes, because you can have 3 scenarios. You can have a low, medium, and optimistic, so that people can actually look at it and say, oh, we quite like how we can plan this. Even if we get that, that's worth it. And that might get them over the threshold, so it triggers the release of money. But if you don't have something solid in numbers, it'll always be seen as, well, that's just an expense, rather than actually, oh, this actually makes a lot of sense. If we do that, we get this back. Therefore, we can trigger releasing the money.
Yeah.
And it's not always finding it down the back of the sofa at the end of the year. So it can happen. Okay. So
right.
This is our next one, Ian. And I think it's something that we take very seriously within Closers, is making sure that people get what they need for their business. Because a lot of things we discussed today, it's about aligning with business, is about getting what they need. and then making the most of it rather than just out of the box training.
Yeah. So I would suggest, and I've not actually studied this exactly, but I would suggest probably 90% of the projects that we have delivered in the last 6 months and that are in our pipeline are bespoke in some way, shape, or form. And that could be from a small one-day workshop that the company wants tailored, the content in some way tailored to their industry, the market, the business itself, and to their needs. So yeah, it's something that is more and more. It's just become the norm for us. I'm not sure it's a great thing because it's very difficult to grow our own business because we're doing all this bespoke work, which is very time consuming. But I can definitely see the value from the customer's perspective, and I actually love turning up at a workshop with bespoke content that is really in depth and well researched, and the salespeople all of a sudden go, "Oh, wait a minute! So this isn't just like a generic off-the-shelf training course. This is the real deal." So I really like that. Question
Yeah, it
in
was
the
from.
chat.
It was just saying, how do salespeople who sell complex consulting services build a daily sales routine? Because without sales routine, it's very hard to measure their effectiveness. So,
Yeah. So what I would suggest is that, if you're selling consulting services, there's some form of, in most cases, there's some form of what I would describe as delivery work, project work involved in that. So I would not think about a daily routine, but I'd think about a weekly routine. Now, it could be that you schedule all your sales activity into one day, but if you call it a daily routine, it devalues the days that you're delivering project work. And I'm actually no different. Sometimes I sit here and I don't get a chance to do much sales work, out and out sales work at all, because we're creating bespoke content or we're organizing a delivery workshop somewhere. So I do not get that time, but I know as long as I keep adding doing the different tasks, sales tasks, that is, over a weekly period, it will add up, it will aggregate, and it will start to deliver. So if you've got some form of delivery involved in your role and you're not 100% sales dedicated, that's not an uncommon challenge. I've got that challenge, but don't view it as your daily sales routine. Think of it as your weekly sales routine. And in that week, mark out, okay, what are the activities that I need to do between a Monday and a Friday? And if you finish them by Tuesday, great. You can maybe do some more, or you can focus on doing your delivery, but don't necessarily restrict yourself to a day, because if you're doing delivery, it's just not possible.
gets in the way as well, because sometimes you have to have a different head on, and if you're just putting a couple of hours in, it sort of gets in the way, and it might get shoved because you didn't have time to do it because you were doing your delivery work rather than your sales work. So I think that's recommended if you can split it out, or at least block out parts of days over the week rather than actually trying to fit it in. Right. So that was our bespoke versus generic, and that's us for today. You get some time back.
One thing, I'm supposed to say this or I'll get in trouble. If you're watching this webinar after the event and not live, if you're watching it after the event on YouTube, please like and subscribe and share whatever it is you do on these social media channels. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Neil, for organising this.
Thanks very much, Shane. It's been great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.